Figured it out. Technology's hard. Okay, we got the recording started. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Service Fabric Community Q&A. We're going to start out a little different today. We're going to have a demo for you, and we all have our fingers crossed that it's going to go great.
Yeah.
So,
absolutely.
But as always, this is a totally open forum. You know, no question is not applicable in terms of being asked. Whether we can answer them is another thing. But you know, whether it's a simpler question or a roadmap question or a complex deep dive question, you know, everything's game to be like.
give me a second to make sense as a presenter.
We one thing while we get the demo ready and going is that we just did Ignite 2 weeks ago, and we did 5 or 6 sessions of Ignite, which we will post the videos for, links to on our blog, team blog post. Maybe Deep has even done it so far. And there's some good talks there that covered all the topics from an overview roadmap to Service Fabric Mesh, to best practices, to working with Windows and Service Fabric, and to Java and Linux and things inside of it all. So I'd encourage you, there's about 6 hours worth of content there, which you can watch on double speed to get it down to 3 hours of content on YouTube. And you know, that helps kind of cover a lot of the work that we're doing certainly over the next few months and things.
We'll get those links posted in Yammer as well. I'm not sure they're there yet, right? You guys,
Deep was going to post them onto the Service Fabric team blog
yeah, we'll post
this week.
I just saw them on the blog post just now, so they are there.
Perfect.
Awesome. So today what I'm going to show you guys actually is some of the work we've been doing around Maven, Java, and the Spring ecosystem to make it easy to deploy and manage your Service Fabric resource-based applications. So the project that I have open in VS Code is, you know, your traditional Spring Boot application. There's nothing Service Fabric about it right now. And to even kind of prove that, I'll just show you the pom.xml, which kind of goes over all the packages and dependencies that we brought in. So there's nothing really Service Fabric related here. All of it is just either SDK dependencies you brought in, or, you know, Spring Boot stuff. And what we're going to do is we're going to bootstrap this Spring Boot project as a Service Fabric resource project and then deploy it to Mesh, all using Maven commands. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to build my project, create a Docker file, create a Docker image out of it. That's what the Docker file build will do, and then push that to Docker Hub. The only additional thing that you have to keep in mind is the credentials for the Docker Hub would actually be in like the Maven config. And for those of you who aren't too familiar with it, Maven is kind of like a build tool for building your Java applications, and it integrates with the Spring framework, which is a framework for the Java language. So once this build is done, I can initiate this project as a Service Fabric Mesh project. So I run a command, maven sf mesh init, and then I give an application name. And when I do that, I get one folder added to my project, which has the YAML file that describes the application. Obviously, with just the application, you can't do much. Applications need to live inside of a network. So we created a command in Maven to actually create a network. And as parameters, it takes in only the most important things when you're defining a network. So the port you want as the ingress, the name of the network, and the listener. And the latter two, the network graph and the listener name, is what the service in the inner application is going to reference. So when I run this command, what this will do is in the exact same folder, it'll add the network. So you can see that the ingress I passed in is set up and the names are set up. It didn't ask for all the other parameters. We kind of bootstrapped that for you. The next step is you actually create the service, and again here we only take in the important details such as, you know, the image name, and then the ports that the service is listening to, and then of course, as I mentioned, the network that it's referencing. So when this command completes, it'll create a separate folder for your service, because an application can have multiple services, and in that service we generate the YAML for you. So all of this, really, the goal here is to make it very easy for the Java and the Spring developers to use the one tool to get to Mesh. And then once this is done, keep in mind that you're currently, you're just authoring YAML files, and now you want to actually deploy this thing to Service Fabric Mesh. There's one command, SF Mesh deploy, and I will run this. This will take some time, so we can come back to this, Mark, after we address some questions.
Okay, perfect.
But while this is running, I'm just going to go over what it's doing. It'll go ahead and create the resource group for you if it doesn't exist, and it'll take all the YAML files that you described, merge them into YAML, and put that into a folder called Cloud for you with the merged JSON. So at the end of the day, to Mesh, you need to deploy an ARM template, and this command will merge all of your YAMLs into the ARM template for you, and then deploy that to Service Fabric Mesh. It also creates a resource group for you, so you don't really have to do anything. And while this command runs, Mark, we can come back to it.
Okay.
But that kind of goes over the Maven tooling that we're building for Service Fabric. Where any Maven project you have, it doesn't have to be Spring, but I chose Spring because it's a popular framework. But any Maven project you have, you can use the CLI to bootstrap it quickly for Mesh, and then deploy and then manage your application.
So you just let us know when you're ready for us to come back.
Yeah.
All right, everyone. So the forum is open. As Mark Fussell said, no questions off limits. So let's put your questions in the chat window, and we'll get started.
What are the plans for secrets inside Service Fabric? Is it going to be something like HashiCorp Vault? Do you plan to provide a local CA with automated certificate generation for microservices using local DNS?
Well, so the plan for what we're doing with that, so let's talk about the various different levels. There's certificate, there's cluster security, and then there's application security. At the cluster security level, we've been doing work there for helping you just to manage the certificates inside the cluster and how we do auto-cert rollover. I think we're still in the middle of validating a thing called a Key Vault extension that allows you to use the identity of the machines to pull down the certs and roll them out over there. But going forward, one of the key things that we're actually doing is providing managed service identity, MSI as it's referred to, at the application level. And what that enables you to do, both for your existing applications as well as the ones that you build with Service Fabric Mesh in your resource model, is that you can have identity associated with a particular application that allows you to reach out into Key Vault, or to have local secrets stored within inside the actual deployment or the actual application itself. And those secrets can be pulled from Key Vault associated with a particular application. So, for example, an application can reach to Key Vault and get certificates used for HTTPS endpoints. It could also use that identity to authenticate with other Azure resources, such as Cosmos DB, so it knows how to attach to a particular database inside your deployments, or inside your other resources inside Azure. How that hooks up to Key Vault itself allows you to hook up to other key security key generation, cert generation capabilities. Yes, so I think they have the ability to hook up to these providers for generating certs that get put into Key Vault. So that's one way that you can say through Key Vault to get certs generated on your behalf. If that was answering the question, which is good.
Mercy.
Okay, so yes, that was something like I expected, but I'm researching now different solutions to put in place to use with Service Fabric Mesh until Service Mesh is there. And I need to encrypt and mutually authenticate services when talking one to another. And I've seen that there are some different solutions like Vault that allows to automatically generate TLS certificates for all the microservices in the cluster automatically. And some capabilities like this would be very nice if someone does not want or cannot use Service Mesh.
Yeah, so I mean, currently at the moment we're building a secret store service into the cluster that allows you to keep a set of secrets there and manage them inside the cluster. But that thing itself is not a certificate authority that can issue certs. Maybe we get there one day, but at the moment we're not trying to go down that path. We're trying to let other authorities issue certs or get them through Key Vault if you're going to get them. So it's more of a case of you can securely keep those certificates on your behalf, but not issue them. So if you want to issue certificates on your behalf, there's nothing that we're actually building into Service Fabric to do that.
Yes, the solutions you are planning is already very good. So yes, but it can be even better.
Yes. So I mean, MSI, the Managed Service Identity. I mean, it's going to be, you know, if it's not in the 6.4 release, it's probably going to be in the one after that. But you know, the time frame of that to be determined. But it's in the next few months, as it were. But yeah, we're not doing a certificate authority inside there yet. I imagine maybe you'll get there one day, but that's not the current plan. So yeah, so right now until that thing's available, I don't know what to suggest. I mean, it's mostly you have to use Key Vault and manage them yourself to get them out of Key Vault. I mean, the other one is that we see a lot of people use Active Directory just for identity, but that may not be giving you certificates. So we see a lot of people put Active Directory AD integration onto the actual service itself. You know, the client goes off and talks to AD, gets a token back and presents that for authentication purposes. But that's just different. That's AD.
Okay.
Okay.
Let's go next. Is there a plan to bring
No, I think
perf
this is-
counters
yeah.
thresholds to understand if something is wrong on-prem and Azure? So is there a lot of perf counters for Service Fabric, but we don't know where the limit is?
So you're talking about performance counters. So there are performance counters today at VM scale set level. So you can see the CPU used and the memory usage of the actual machine itself. And inside Azure, they've built inside a portal and Azure Monitor. And inside the monitor, you can use the Metrics Explorer to look at the actual CPU usage across the VM scale sets that you see. So if that's what you're asking for, is that the thing? Or is that,
No, that's not what I'm asking for. Usually when I am performing troubleshooting sessions, yes, the first thing that you see is CPU usage, memory usage, and that kind of things. But sometimes you need to see, for example, how much time is Service Fabric spending while performing a transaction commit. I remember that I read somewhere that if you are above 70 milliseconds or so, you need to take care of it. But there are a bunch of Service Fabric performance counters specific for Service Fabric. So it will be good to know if we can pinpoint some specific performance counters to see if there is something wrong specifically with Service Fabric, or if one of our services is affecting Service Fabric performance.
Yes. I know there's some performance counters at the actor level, at the reliable services level, and at other parts inside our framework. And I know that we've added more performance counters recently, but your question is which one of those are important for me to look at?
That is correct. For example, in terms of hard drive, we know that below 20 milliseconds, we are good. Above 20 milliseconds, we are wrong. And there are several other performance counters. For example, for network interface, we have the output queue length above 2, we are wrong. But for Service Fabric, we don't know nothing.
Yes. No, I hear you. I can't tell you off the top of my head unless anyone else knows the performance counters inside reliable services runtime that are important.
There are some. I don't know what the thresholds would be. It's always highly dependent on the workload and the hardware and everything else. There's some common ones, but there's some common ones that you can probably look at just for .NET specifically, like especially with CLR memory.
CLR
For
memory.
example, the garbage collector, performance invent. Yeah, I know. That's for the service that is running on Service Fabric. But how do you know if the problem is not the service? If the problem is something inside Service Fabric? We don't know nothing. There are performance counters for Service Fabric, and I know that there is a reason for it, but we don't know the thresholds for them.
I think that's a great question.
Yeah.
I really do. I think that we've documented them, but I think what you're saying is that we haven't done a particularly compelling job of trying to tell you what the thresholds look like and when to use them all.
That is correct. I used to be a Microsoft PFE, so a lot of things that I do right now, and we have other ex-PFEs also working with me, and we focus a lot on performance and that kind of things and troubleshooting. And when we try to figure out if the problem is the .NET application, it's very easy for us to do it, but we don't know how to pinpoint a problem inside Service Fabric.
So Mark, if we have that documented, maybe they're not discoverable.
No, I mean, there's a whole list of them. The list of what they are is there, and there's a whole bunch of them. But saying how they apply, when and what the guidance around them probably doesn't say too much. And again, it depends a lot of these things. So I know I need to look at some of the things that's out there again. But I think the best thing to do is, can we get back to you?
Well, we should. We should go review the explanations that we do give on the ones that are there, because they might be inadequate.
Exactly.
It's as far as the threshold thing. I think the threshold thing is pretty tricky because of the way that the Service Fabric platform interacts with the code that you run in the services. So there's a lot of interdependency. So you might have a threshold that's meaningful in one situation but not meaningful in another. Thresholds are kind of difficult there. But as far as what the actual counters mean and how to interpret that, if it's not clear in the documentation, that's something we can probably look at.
Yeah.
So
the thresholds that make the most sense are the ones that we typically use for auto scaling today, because they give you a bigger picture, I think, of when you're going to need more capacity or when you don't need as much capacity. But some of the more intricate ones, it's difficult to tell. I mean, you could look at disk queue, for example. You could have the queue length of the disks, but then it's highly dependent on the type of disks that you're using, because some disks have a much lower threshold that's acceptable for disk queue length. Others have a much higher one. And then it also depends on, are you using stateful services or stateless? So there are a lot of variables at play that.
Yeah, specifically with this, for example, there is a specific recommendation from Microsoft itself where the threshold is, and also if the disk is solid state drive or if it's in RAID, and which RAID it is, 0, 5, etc. So you have, for example, a specific recommendation. So if you're in RAID above 50 milliseconds, you're wrong. Below 50 milliseconds, you're good. In this queue length, I think it's twice the number of physical drives that you have, as far as I remember. It's from the top of my head. And it's
different for network backed storage.
That's
so I think the explanations probably need to be a little better. The thresholds I think are a little more difficult because there are a lot of caveats around it. But
so, for example, there's one of the Service Fabric actor invocations per second of an actor.
For example,
which
it's what are you trying to achieve? Right?
Yeah, I mean, are you trying to?
Some of those are difficult.
Yes.
But there's guidance in how much you should store in a stateful service. For example, the documentation says it should be in terms of kilobytes. So all right, 200 kilobytes, 500 kilobytes, 2 billion kilobytes. I mean, it is.
I know we've done some more work in this place recently, particularly to do with the state management and things inside there that Preetha has done. But I'll need to get back to you about how it relates to the storage size and some of the things inside there. So, good question.
It's definitely something for us to think about.
If you could, I mean, if there's any particular scenario, like I'm using reliable services and I would want to look at the storage size and how that affects it and performance kind of around that you're interested in, like send us that. That would be good.
Okay.
Outside of that, we're going to go back and look through all.
Yeah, were there actually specific counters you were thinking of that you had in mind where thresholds would be helpful?
What?
Were there, so when you thought of this question, were there specific performance counters you had in mind where if you did have some guidance around thresholds that would be helpful? Do you know what those specific counters would be?
For example, how much are you taking to persist in your reliable collection? How much are you spending while replicating from node to node? Because that way you can pinpoint if there is an issue in the network or it is an issue in how Service Fabric is replicating the state through other nodes, and you can see if the problem is in the infrastructure, in the server, in the network configuration, or in Service Fabric. There's a bunch of layers out there.
There's a bunch of things there, like there's a number of transactions per second you do on the reliable dictionary.
Yeah. For example, today I have an issue with Service Fabric, and the problem wasn't Service Fabric, was a group policy domain how the group policy was applied to 6 of the 8 nodes of an on-prem cluster. So it's kind of difficult to figure out where the issue is coming from.
I mean, there actually are a bunch. There are disk size, item count, write operations per second, transfer operations per second. There's a bunch there.
Yeah, you need to know specifically what they're measuring.
Yes.
Yep.
Because then it's a lot of it's kind of cross comparisons then. So if you see that your transactions are slow, you need to dig in further and figure out what part of the transaction.
This really won't be too helpful, but we'll dig into it more.
Yeah. That's good. That's good.
Okay, let's go next from, thanks, Emilio. Let's go next to Whit. It says you have a number of internal login analysis tools that gives Azure support all sorts of insight into what goes wrong during deployments. Do you have any plans to make these more available to customers?
Tentatively, we've actually been talking about it a little bit internally. We don't have a decision just yet. But yes, we're thinking along the same lines as you, though. Sorry, I don't have a better answer for you right now, but we are looking at it.
That's
fine, thanks.
One of the things we did do is all the TSPs, we did put them out, right? All the troubleshooting guides that we had.
TSPs are out there, yeah.
So we are kind of, going along that direction.
Yeah, we took all the TSGs are all the support guidance that our support guys have to look at when a call comes in. They're all in a GitHub repo. We should find that GitHub repo. Yeah.
Sure,
Everything those tools at the moment is there's a really arcane format of how it gets written, and then there's tools in the middle. But yeah.
Sure, I'm thinking of a ticket that I just had support solve for me where I was just missing an attribute on the settings manifest somewhere. And of course, they share this massive thing that says, oh, here's what clearly says where the problem was. And yeah, it makes sense. But it would have been nice not to spend 2 days waiting on support to get back to me and just see, here it is right here in the Explorer. What went wrong here?
Yeah,
that would be helpful to have. Yeah,
that would be very helpful.
We hear you.
Do you have a support ticket number for that?
Yeah, actually, if you give us the support ticket number, we can look exactly what tool they used, because that might be something we can just get out there. I was thinking of something a little bit different, but that might.
Yeah, this seems like something that we need to kind of say, even if it's like a validation or something like that. Yeah.
Because in my case, it was just a mysterious error. VSTS just failed to, or DevOps, whatever it's called, just failed to deploy and just rolled everything back. And it's like, what happened? And here you go. Where should I send that to?
Do you mind putting it in the chat window?
I can do it.
If you don't mind, if not, you could just you can email it to me, Mark Robb.
MARKROB.
We just need the ticket number, right?
Yeah, we just need the number.
One tool that I use to review the ETL files that are written by Service Fabric is Purview, because you can see the events per category, and it's more easy to find exceptions inside the files that Service Fabric creates.
Yeah, with respect to the tooling, as Wasson mentioned, like one of the challenges that we have is, like the tools are kind of built for, like going through some of these things in a very arcane manner, as well as they are not really ready for public consumption, so you might have to set it up in some particular way. And so those are the things that we are looking into. But if there was a problem that you could have fixed on your own, and which unfortunately you couldn't, that is something we can act on and make sure that our diagnostics actually pulls that information out. We use guest exes. Up until recently, we've been doing remove app, then redeploy app for upgrades. Often this seems to cause a degree of rebalancing on the cluster, especially if it's loaded. I have now implemented rolling upgrades, which seems to be much less disruptive. Does this sound right?
That sounds very right to me.
Yep. Rolling upgrades are the way to go.
Yep.
Jacob asked, can someone work on the docs for getting Active Directory auth set up for my Azure clusters? Right now, there's just a handful of scripts that just say run this first.
Fully agree.
Yeah.
Yes, we will do. We will prioritize that over the next sprint.
Yeah.
So,
Agreed. Yeah.
yes, he says staring across the table.
Yes.
I will work on it.
Yes.
I'll make
No,
it
I agree
happen.
with you on this, because unfortunately we say this best practice. We say this best practice that actually you should use Active Directory on your cluster for the best form of authentication against it all. And the docs are, let's just say, we wrote them about 8 months ago or so and do need some additional work inside that. So, yes, let's prioritize that one over the next, watch over the next 4 weeks.
Yeah, having
Nice.
a minimum
That's why we
buy-in
have
would
these
be really
meetings.
nice.
Are you stuck at the moment?
Calls.
If you're actually stuck at the moment, we can help you.
We're getting by with client certificates, but I'd really like to get away from it.
Yeah. Okay. Fair.
Yes.
Are you able to use the scripts that are out there?
No, because our Active Directory setup is like we're a company with 270,000 employees, so like getting an enterprise application set up in Azure AD requires moving mountains.
Can you can you create an AD account? Can you not do that?
I can create like service principals and AD applications. But,
Yes, AD applications. You can do AD applications?
Yeah.
Okay. Because it's a matter of just associating an AD application with the cluster. And then the AD application is how you, have you managed to do that or not?
I haven't gone down the path. Like the scripts were really rather incredibly complex, but I kind of left it alone.
Okay. They shouldn't need to be.
Like I went through and ran the scripts and looked at the audit logs from my Azure AD, and it was a fairly long list of things that were created. There was like multiple service principals, multiple applications, an enterprise application, which I couldn't find any documentation to see how that actually differs from like a regular Azure AD application.
Okay.
There's a lot of lack of clarity there.
Okay, that's good for feedback for telling us. Thank you. We will. Yes. Send me Mark M. Fussell at Microsoft.com an email, and if you're stuck in some way, we'll start working through this.
Marcin asks, do you plan to provide some kind of a runtime guard for containers in Service Fabric Mesh?
Runtime guard, like
Runtime guard.
Any kind of Azure ATP integration for Service Fabric Mesh, anti-malware monitoring. So I'm assuming what you're asking for is some sort of security stuff that we provide. Is that what you're asking for?
Yes, I'm looking for some kind of solutions like runtime guard from Twistlock or something similar, just to get to be able to find out if my containers have been compromised and are running something else that was not expected.
So there are two. Yes, so it's kind of like Aqua, but like with I'm just thinking this through. So yeah, we are looking into what kind of security solution that we can provide there. But are you looking for static analysis or
there's three things.
Runtime analysis.
There's build analysis, and then there's runtime analysis. Build analysis can be done through Azure Container Registry, where they're allowing you to do virus checking, build checking against that. At runtime, we did work to integrate with Aqua.
Yeah, no, the thing though, the reason why I'm kind of thinking this through is because you as a, when you actually deploy an application, you don't get host privilege. So you're running within a Hyper-V container, so you're not actually hitting anything in the host. So you are blocked off from affecting others. But
I think the question is,
can I run Aqua as that's kind of where I'm going to. Like, there is nothing that prevents you from actually deploying a pod that has, say, something from Aqua, some container image or something that's monitoring the traffic out of your pod.
Yeah, but Aqua itself can't, because the questions are like scope to mesh, right? So we won't have the Aqua runtime on the clusters. Right?
That's what I'm kind of.
Yeah.
Well,
There must be some.
We should answer this in two ways. Yes, if I have a service fabric cluster today myself, and I want to run containers inside it all.
Yeah.
Yes. Can I run Aqua there?
Yeah.
That
Yes.
will allow me to do virus checking at runtime with those containers. The answer is yes. You can
Yes.
run Aqua. We
Yes,
make
you
Aqua
can.
work in that environment.
Yes.
But this is for mesh.
Yeah. So, but I'm just saying. I know it's for me.
Yes.
But we should just make sure
For
it's
Azure
like that.
clusters,
Yeah.
you're right. Yeah.
Yes, for Azure clusters, you can do that. You make Aqua run against that because we've had quite a few customers do that.
Yeah.
Inside Service Fabric Mesh, are we going to run container hosting runtime in those environments? We hadn't really got that far thinking about that was needed just yet because there were
Yeah.
build time checks that happen through all that, and everything runs inside isolated
The-
environments.
No, but his I think what he's asking is this is why I'm kind of
we hadn't really thought yet.
Yeah, no, but his question is, I know like what my container is allowed to do, and I want it to be kind of bounded with the operations that my container is allowed to do, even within the boundary. Like I don't want it to be running any other, because I might be running third-party code, but I want to make sure that the third-party code is not doing things that I don't know of. Is that right?
I'm looking for some solutions, like for example Aqua, that will find out some anomalies in my container behavior that it suggests that it runs some malware or something like this. And of course, resetting the container to the base image will get rid of the of this malware, but still it would be valuable to be able to detect if something if this container got attacked or something like that, because the attack can repeat and it can eavesdrop on data processed in this container and stuff like that. And in normal Service Fabric, you can run on the host nodes Aqua or something like that. But in Service Fabric Mesh, there is we have no control on the host nodes, and I would expect from Microsoft to do some kind of smart analysis of what's happening in containers and help us detect anomalies.
So the eventual place this will go, but we haven't got any plans for this right now, is this thing called Azure Security Center. And Azure Security Center has plans to do runtime analysis on containers in general, wherever they're running. So we haven't formulated any plans, but if you were looking at how we would probably do that, is Azure Security Center would hook up to the mesh and allow you to run those things. But we haven't got that far in thinking yet.
Yes, that's exactly what I'm looking for. So, yeah.
Azure Security Center are doing work on Linux containers right now in order to be able to do runtime analysis on containers running inside Service Fabric or running inside AKS container deployments. Is what they're currently working on. And this sounds like a good ask for them when we get to mesh, but that we haven't got that far yet because they're still just building out the runtime checks on Linux containers, and then they're going to do Windows containers, and then they're going to integrate that with Service Fabric clusters and AKS clusters, and then they'll probably get to mesh. So you're talking about next year, but that's the way it would go.
Yep.
So sorry for the answer, but yes.
I'm on-prem. Greg asked if I'm on-prem. If I were to expose a reverse proxy service, could I use 443 as the default entry point for the cluster?
Yes,
Yeah.
I think you can
You
figure.
can.
Yes.
Yeah,
you can.
You can.
You still don't, you don't want to, but
Yeah,
you can.
but you
You
can.
shouldn't. You can.
But you can.
Well, can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. I think I just ran through my living room when my kids were watching Ratatouille, and you may have heard that. I don't know.
Yeah, I think we definitely did.
I apologize. I thought I was on mute, and I just went to take myself off mute. So yeah, I was just wondering, is there any reason why I would or wouldn't want to do that with the 443? Because I'm thinking about the available ports that I have, and I think I brought this up in a previous call. Available ports that you put in on your cluster config, that's what the ports are going to be used for the internal. But if I set up my proxy so that I can, the thing that I get into the cluster with from outside, that does not have to be one of those available ports. It can be any port, and I could do 443 if I wanted to, and I could connect to individual nodes or whatever without having to go through a load balancer.
Yeah, the cluster config lets you specify exactly what port you want to use for those things, but that's just so. I mean, there are a few things, right? There's the management endpoint, the HTTP management endpoint, which is usually 19,000 for TCP, 19,080 for HTTP, and then there's the reverse proxy, which is the thing that actually connects to your service endpoints, and that's usually 19,081. You can use any port you want for those. That's all configurable, and that's just the port those things listen on. And then if you're sitting behind a NAT device or a load balancer or something, then the port that you expose through that is, of course, configurable on that device. So
Yeah, okay. I'm good on that one. Thank you.
Although, just again, usually for reverse proxy, we advise not to expose that port just because it's a bit of a security hole. But if you have it,
that makes total sense.
Yeah, if you have FTP services.
Yeah, because there's no whitelisting or ACLing or anything like that. So if you expose the reverse proxy, that one specifically, out to the public internet, then anyone can access all your HTTP services that are behind the reverse proxy. So if you're set up in a way where you have it under control and you know there's only one service back there and there will only ever be one service, then you can get away with it. But it's just kind of a scary thing to do because it's by default opens up everything.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
The next question he had was, can we pass a structured object into the service fabric settings? We are considering moving all configuration to app settings.json. What are your thoughts? Obviously, we couldn't have our actual.
Yeah, so your same question?
Yeah, same.
Yeah,
we couldn't have our actual
so the settings, okay. Well, if you're using config packages, where you have a settings.xml, and then you have this application parameters XML that allows you to override things in the settings XML, like that whole flow. Those are just key value pairs. But in the config package, right next to the settings.xml file, you can put any files you want. So if you want to put a JSON file in there with your own format or your own object structure, you can just go ahead and do that. But when you read it through code, through the APIs that give you access to the config package, all you'll get back is just file handles. You'll be parsing the file yourself in that case. And then the application parameters won't flow into that. So that overriding behavior only goes into the settings XML. So it's kind of a special case thing. So basically, you can put anything you want in a config package. It's just a set of files. But that application parameter override thing is a special case just for settings XML, which is just key value pairs.
So would that mean that you cannot, so what I'm doing with my application parameters files is I have obviously a parameter file per environment that I'm deploying to and using it as a configuration for these different deployments. Do you not have the ability to configure those config packages per, when I'm deploying my service fabric package, I'm pushing out, here's my app, and then here's my parameters that I'm sending with it. So if you were to go to the config package route, would I still have that ability? So I need to change these things per environment I'm deploying to.
Yeah, no, you still have that ability, but it only works with that settings XML file in the config package. So that one file is kind of a special case that we invented that allows those parameters to flow through. So if you wanted, because I think your question was about structured objects in there, right?
Right.
And so there's no good way to pass structured objects through those XML files unless you do something.
Yeah, we're having to flatten everything out, and it's sort of a pain in the rear.
Because it's just key value pairs. So unless you did something bonkers like passing a JSON string or something, but probably not quite what you're asking for.
Yeah, it sort of leads into the next question of we're considering, because it's such a pain to pass in a structured object and flatten everything out, we're considering moving almost everything over into app settings.json and only putting service fabric stuff into the parameters file XML. Is that a bad idea?
It's not a bad idea, but you'd have to come up with a way so when you're deploying, if you're doing it per environment, you would need some other mechanism, probably in your build system or in your, somewhere in your CI pipeline, that's where you would inject different app settings.json files per deployment or per environment. So it would be a mechanism.
I can use like a flow cheetah, or I can use, we have some options on parameterizing JSON files based upon build configuration, and then passing in the build configuration to MS build.
Right. Exactly. It takes the problem out of Service Fabric. It's no longer a Service Fabric feature you would use, but a feature of your CI/CD environment or your build pipeline would do that then. So you'd have your profiles, like build profiles, would be part of your CI/CD pipeline, or rather your environment deployment environment profiles would be part of your CI/CD pipeline. Which that's not a bad way to go either, though. I mean that's a perfectly fine way to do it.
Unfortunately, what we end up having is just a lot of configuration files, right? We got app settings.config. There's some things that are in the app.config, which I discussed 2 calls back with you guys.
Yeah.
You got the parameters XML. I've got an event flow config. It's starting to be like a lot of configuration files, which I understand there's a need for some. Is there anything with, I was wondering when the developer asked me about this, brought it up, if there was any sort of solution with Service Fabric Mesh that might make passing structured data easier or not.
Pass structured data easier. Well, I don't know if it'd make it easier, because there it's mainly environment variables going into your container. So you have a couple more options, like you can mount files into a volume, for example, and that file could have whatever configuration you want in it. But in that environment, though, like in that environment, when you're setting configuration based on the environment you're deploying to, that pushes it even more in the direction of this needs to be part of your build and deployment pipeline and not so much part of Service Fabric. Because the application parameters, those XML things that you're using now, the actual purpose of that is if you have an application type and you're instantiating a bunch of instances of the application from the type, you can parameterize each one of those. So kind of like, in C# you write a class, you can create an object from the class, and you can give each object a bunch of different parameter values. It's meant for that, not so much for deploying to different environments. The idea of parameterizing per environments is something that was kind of invented by tooling. Visual Studio and DevOps kind of used that application parameter feature to set up a way to do different, different parameters per environment, because it's a useful thing to do. But that feature itself in Service Fabric was really meant for just when you're instantiating application instances from an application type within a single cluster. So you can parameterize them that way. So I think you're probably going to have better luck with this just in general if you make it part of your build system and your build pipeline rather than using the application settings that are built into Service Fabric.
Okay,
and in that case,
that's your...
yeah. And in that case, you can use app settings JSON or whatever you want, because then you're not restricted to any particular format that Service Fabric is imposing, which would be like the settings XML, which just has key value pairs. Because then you can use whatever you want, because you're seeing configuration options from 2 kind of unrelated platforms, right? There's a configuration set up within Service Fabric that's tied into the rolling upgrade mechanism, and then you're writing .NET applications, and .NET has its own configuration mechanism, like ASP.NET has its own configuration mechanism. And so what you're seeing is kind of you're getting exposed to both of those things.
What I'm hearing is it sounds like I'm misusing the Service Fabric configurations, and I should just stick with the classic .NET configurations, and that Service Fabric configurations just handle Service Fabric specific configuration.
Yeah. I wouldn't say you're misusing it. I think, I wouldn't say you're misusing it, but I think for what you're trying to do with more structured configuration objects, you'll probably have better luck pushing that out to the CI/CD environment. Let your CI/CD handle the environment-specific configurations, because it's probably going to be better for that. And then when you get into the mesh world, you'll have the same kind of answer. So it'll all still kind of work there the same way. You won't have to change anything, assuming that's where you want to go.
All right. Next question is Greg's as well. Service
Sorry, I
Fabric.
pasted them all in pretty quick.
Yeah, that's okay. Just put it out there. Service Fabric and Docker Hub. I have a Stack Overflow out there on Service Fabric and Docker Hub. In general, I'm wondering if I'm approaching this incorrectly. All right, let's see this.
Go ahead. Oh no, so I read the Stack Overflow question. It looks like you're approaching it correctly, and also the comment from Diego, kind of, it looks like you guys agreed on solution, and what he suggested was actually fine. So,
Okay,
in terms of building and deploying .NET containerized applications, you create an image, push it to Docker Hub, and then when you reference it in Service Fabric manifests, Diego's answers kind of covers how you do that.
What I wasn't clear on with what Diego had answered, and where I was going to go and sort of do a proof of concept, just because I didn't understand it, is am I literally creating two different solution files? One solution file to house my code and create my Docker image, upload that to Docker Hub completely independent of Service Fabric, and then create a Service Fabric solution that then references Docker Hub, and the only thing that solution really does is orchestrate that container.
Well, it's not so much solution files, but I think what you probably will set up in production is you will have a CI/CD pipeline that is actually doing this for you. So you're writing your .NET Core code or any of your code, and any changes that you make and you push it in will trigger a build of a container image that gets pushed into Docker Hub. And then you deploy that particular image using a Service Fabric application or Docker Compose, for example, into a Service Fabric cluster.
Right. So again, when I mean solution files, I'm literally thinking of like .slns, and that first .sln that contains the C# code is not actually a Service Fabric solution necessarily. It could be a non-Service Fabric solution.
Doesn't have to be. Yes.
You do a file, so the creation of the image is completely separate, because when I was looking at the documentation on how to containerize an existing .NET application, and as soon as you do that, it turns it into a Service Fabric solution. And then at that point in time, I could not, there's no published to Docker Hub. There's only published to Azure Registry.
I see.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I'm running into that problem.
So in your development environment, you want to keep them separate, because your application is not a Service Fabric thing specifically. You just need to produce a container image that goes into Docker Hubs, and later you can deploy it to Service Fabric, right?
I don't know. I'm really looking for guidance here, because I'm trying to follow a doco that says, this is how you containerize a Service Fabric, containerize an existing .NET application, is to right-click, add, what is it? Not Docker support, but orchestration support, and then choose the Service Fabric option. And when I do that, it turns into a Service Fabric solution.
Yeah, the tooling tries to kind of do a couple things all at once. So it's trying to be convenient for you by saying, well, you want to run this in Service Fabric and you want to run a container. So let's do two things at the same time. Let's, one, add the Docker file so that we can build a container, and two, we'll convert this into a Service Fabric project so that the tooling can just go and deploy it all in one big motion for you. So what it's doing is kind of a convenience thing for you, but you don't have to do it that way if you don't want to. So in your mind, you can have a solution file which just loads up your .NET project, maybe has a Docker file in it so that you can produce a container image out of it. And then if you want, you can create a completely separate solution file which just has an SF project, the Service Fabric application project. And all that is just an empty, it's just pretty much an empty application.
Yeah, that seems a little hokey, right? Is that what you'd recommend?
I don't know. I wouldn't necessarily recommend one over the other. Kind of depends on how you want to do it. If you want to keep you think of it this way then. If you want to keep your original .NET application totally agnostic as to where it runs, then keep them separate. So if you're thinking, I might want to run this thing just in a container and not on Service Fabric, then probably keep them separate. If you're convinced and you're absolutely certain that this thing's always going to run on Service Fabric, it might be easier to just do what Visual Studio is kind of trying to push you to do and just combine them into one. It'll work either way, though.
or is your
And
question?
I guess what would really help there is if there was a publish option to Docker Hub instead of only having a publish option to Azure Registry.
Supports today, like that one-step process.
Yeah.
The tooling only lets you, hey, which Azure Container Registry do you want to publish it to? So I think he's saying, well, if I had a publish to Docker Hub option there, then I don't have to really do these independently. I can do this in one fell swoop.
Gotcha.
But I don't have that option.
I really don't want two solution files. My developers are going to get that.
I see what you're saying. Okay. So we need
Mind
to
if I chime in because I've done this?
Go ahead.
Sure. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, if you have a solution that has a Service Fabric project in it, you can have other projects in that solution that you haven't added as a Service Fabric application. They can be separate. You can just right-click and add Docker support to a .NET project that's in the same solution, and the easiest trick is to go ahead and edit the Docker file or the composed file to change the tag that it creates the container as to be hub.docker or whatever you want, or your own registry or anything. Just change the tag it uses to create the image in the Docker composed file, and then when it gets pushed, it will push to whatever registry it's tagged as.
Yeah, it's not a bad idea. And then in the same solution, you can create a Service Fabric application then in the same solution and choose the guest container option, and then just point to the container image in Docker Hub. Yeah, that's a good way to do it. That'll work. Yeah, it's a good suggestion.
All right, I'm gonna have to play around with it and see it work. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and I guess it's probably an action item for us to actually document that option if you want to, if you want to do this one-click thing.
It's kind of surprising. I didn't realize it only supports.
VS only supports.
That VS does, yeah.
So,
okay.
And so if you want to do Docker Hub, you're actually doing it manually. Like you can of course edit the config files, but I don't think we have explicitly.
So, okay, guys, so we have a little time check here. I'm going to give Suds like the last 5 minutes, so we got about 3 minutes or whatever.
Okay.
The next question is actually Greg's again. It says, when are you planning to release Service Fabric ASP Core namespace? Microsoft Service Fabric .ASP.NET Core.configuration. We have lifted some of this code to use as our reverse proxy, but would prefer to reference the production code.
I think let me check. I think that might already be out there. Right.
I've heard a bunch of other ASP.NET Core, Microsoft.ServiceFabric.ASP.NET Core namespaces are out there, but my developer could not find the .configuration or the configuration namespace. So we sort of took the stuff off of GitHub.
Yeah. Okay. I remember now. Because we merged that in just recently, so it hasn't been part of an official release yet. Yeah, that just came in. Yeah, we just merged that recently. Okay. But it is merged, so it should be in a upcoming release then, so pretty soon. Yeah, so it wouldn't be up on NuGet yet, but it will be.
Okay, thank you.
Excited to hear at Ignite about the features in the next release. How is it coming along? Any date yet? Yes, it is imminent.
Yeah, I mean, the 6.4 release, runtime release, is trying to get out by the end of this month.
Yeah,
we're trying to make
it's imminent. It's in a couple of weeks' time.
Yes.
I seem to recall I mentioned somewhere that there will be some sort of automatic stateful backup in the next major Service Fabric release. And is that coming out? Yes, that's the same 6.4 release.
I just replied to this, and I pointed to Mikkel's video at Ignite that he did at minute 20, where you can see it in operation and how it works. You can see it there. That's one of the things that's coming out.
Any timeline on the OData Stateful Data Explorer? So there is no there is no timeline on the Service Fabric Explorer one where you can see the data, but in Mikkel's video, I don't know if he's talking about how you can view the backup data as well.
Again, I replied to an email, and that is, in the backup image, we've built out viewers that allow you to take the image that gets saved and manipulate that before you reload it. But there isn't the no data or any other thing that allows you to see live running data that's running in a cluster yet.
There's
we recognize this as a big hole, but we had to get it back up and restore once done first.
Yeah, so we will let you edit backed up data and restoring it from there, but the live data we're still not there yet.
Quite all right, thank you.
Is there a way to not tell a service about the settings at all and just provide them at the application level?
You can take this offline, guys. I know you answered a bunch of my questions.
But yeah, it's good that you're posting these on Stack Overflow. You know, we appreciate that.
Yeah, actually, that's really good.
Because you know, like the more you do that, the more we can actually answer these questions once.
Stack Overflow.
Yeah.
You should begin to. Are you there?
No.
Yeah, I'm here.
Is Marcin?
Marcin's.
Yeah.
So you want to take this one?
Yeah, sure. So can you elaborate about using Bosch for multi-cloud or on-prem deployments? Yeah, so the whole point of this work is Bosch is an open source technology out there that is infrastructure as a code that helps you deploy and manage like anything on a bunch of VMs. So the primary goal of this is it'll enable folks to do Linux standalone deployments. So Service Fabric Linux clusters using Bosch as the deployment mechanism will be able to run Linux clusters on-prem or any other cloud. The status of this project is that it's still ongoing. It's an open source project, so it will be open sourced. And that's the status of it. Probably closer to mid-November, it'll be an update.
So Marcin asks, like is the Docker for Windows Memory Management broken? So if there is an issue like that, can you open a Git issue if you haven't already, and send the link to one of us? Because we'll have to investigate that. That seems like an issue if multiple people are hitting the same problem. And I see Mark has responded to the same comments.
Perfect. Okay, I think that's it. So do you want to wrap up your demo?
Sure.
Close the loop on that.
And while you get that ready, we're going to post it on our blog site, but we're actually having an AMA on Twitter that's happening in 2 weeks' time that I was asked to remind everyone about. So you don't have to wait until next month. You can also find us on the Twitter AMA that's coming up.
AMA's Ask Me Anything.
It's Ask Me Anything. It's the same format as this, but I presume it's on, not live, but just written, I guess. I think it'll be. So that's another thing that we're going to try out and reach out that way as well, if people prefer that format.
Yeah, so just to close the loop on the demo, the app that was deployed got deployed. It's just the basic Spring Music app. It's deployed to Azure, and I think that's about it. The code for all of this is open source, and I will send you the link, or I can actually paste it. Yeah, paste it right now. This is the same demo, by the way, we use for all other Azure Container Services as well. So,
nice,
cool. Thank you, sir.
All right. That's it.
I had one other quick question. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I ran into a bug with my Windows containers that was only fixed in 1803. So I guess my question is sort of two questions in one, in the sense that I wasn't at Ignite, so I don't know when Service Fabric plans to support Server 2019 containers, or if it already does. And then sort of secondly, and I don't think I can convince my guys to upgrade my virtual hosts to be 1803, and my understanding is my virtual host needs to be 1803 to host an 1803 container. But if I was able to do that, is Service Fabric planning on supporting 1803 containers? My understanding is they only currently support 1709.
So the answer to your question whether we will support 1803 with the 6.4 release end of this month, it will be supported. So Windows Server version 1803 will be supported. Now the second thing that you said is, well, if you already have what you can, if you already have Windows Server 1709, can you run them on 1803? So the answer is, if you're running in process isolation, the answer is no, you cannot, because the container it's not compatible. You can run them as Hyper-V though. Like if you run them in Hyper-V isolation, you can.
They're going to kill my RAM. It's going to kill my RAM, my virtual host. I can't do that.
Yeah, so you're not going to get the right density. Though, the other thing that Service Fabric does offer in these cases is we allow you to build these images for multiple platforms, meaning, so you can actually specify, hey, my container image, here's my container image for version 1709, here's my container image for version 1803. And depending on what your host is running, we will actually pick up the right container image for that host. So if you're in the middle of an upgrade going from, or if you have certain machines or certain nodes that are in 1709 and some of them are getting upgraded to 1803, we will make sure that whatever is running on 1709 is the image that was built for 1709. But unfortunately, for the other question that you're asking, images are not compatible. Let me follow up on that, because
sorry, go ahead.
No, so that's something that Windows is looking into, but they're not there yet.
Yeah. So I want to follow up a question on what you just said, because that could actually be the determination if we're actually able to use Windows containers or not. I've got a bug where Windows 10 cannot work with BitLocker turned on and run a container unless you're running an 1803 container. Are you saying that if I was to have my developers use Windows, I think we're on 1703 or 1709, and develop against those containers, yet then when I would deploy to my Service Fabric cluster, I could repoint those to go back to Windows Server 1609 or 1607 containers? Is that possible?
As long as you
that's
build
going to
it,
save us.
as long as the images are built for the multiple OS queues, you're okay. Now, for your development experience, you do know that whenever you're running Windows 10, everything is running as in Hyper-V mode. So, that's what you're doing. But if you're saying that I want to, but if your thing is, what you're saying is, I want to develop and make my code changes on 1809, but at the same time, I will have some 1803, but I'll have some 1709 machines where I will rebuild this exact same code using some scripts or something, but not actual development from the user.
Yeah.
And as long as I push that to that will work, because now for let's say your container service is called container service 1, it will have 2 images to pick up from. So we can pick up the 1709 image and run it.
So I can run my 1803 image is what I'm required to have for BitLocker to support. Windows containers do not work with BitLocker turned on unless you're on 1803. I can develop that way and then upload to my Docker repository, to my previous question, my Docker registry, a 1607 version of that container, and then deploy that to my Service Fabric cluster, because the VM host for the Service Fabric cluster is 1607.
Yes, but see, at the end of the day, you are still having a cluster that is running, say, 1803 as the host. That is what you're running. So either which way, you have to somehow push the 1709 version of your image. So you will.
Yes, I can build that. My build servers, all of my servers are on can push a 1607. Realize I'm saying 1607 because we're on the long-term support branch for our virtual hosts.
Yeah.
We are not on the biannual release for the virtual hosts.
As long as you have tested that, the 1607 builds do work, because there might be some OS fixes or something that you might have taken dependency on. So as long as you verify that 1607, it just works. It passes all your tests, then sure. Yeah.
Well, that could be interesting. All right, you may have just saved the possibility of Windows containers at the organization. I appreciate it.
Yeah, sure. All right.
All right, that's it. Cool. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, guys.
See you next month.
Thank you. Bye-bye.